rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows like fists demanding entry. The marble kitchen of Giovanni Castelliano's Boston mansion gleamed under lightning strikes, each flash illuminating the scene in sharp, brutal white. 11:47 p.m. The clock on the wall ticked forward with mechanical indifference. Giovanni stood frozen in the doorway, his white dress shirt soaked through from the thunderstorm outside, rain dripping onto the Italian tile floor. His dark eyes, storm gray and penetrating, fixed on the woman before him. She was scarred, a thin line running from her left temple down to her jawbone, her hands calloused like a laborous, her wrists marked with old bruises that had healed into permanent shadows. But it was her face that broke him. One eye swollen completely shut, purple and angry. Her throat bore handprints like terrible flowers blooming across delicate skin. Someone had put their hands around Mia Sinclair's neck and squeezed. She did not look at him. She moved instead with the efficiency of someone who had rehearsed this moment in her head 100 times. Her trembling fingers shoved children's clothes into a garbage bag, tiny purple pajamas with cartoon stars, a thin cardigan that had been washed so many times it was threadbare, socks with holes in the heels. Each item disappeared into that black plastic with the sound of surrender. In her other hand, she gripped a hospital bill folded to the most devastating number. $35,000. The words "final notice" were stamped across the top in angry red ink. Emma stood beside her, 5 years old, with dark hair that fell to her shoulders and a crescent moon birthmark on her left wrist. The same mark. The same shape. The birthmark Giovanni Castelliano had been searching for across 5 years of hell, 5 years of rage, 5 years of knowing his brother had stolen his daughter and vanished her into the wind. "We have to go," Mia whispered, her voice barely audible, trembling like a candle in the wind. "I wrote it down. I wrote you a letter explaining. You're too good, Giovanni. You're too much. I can't let my choices pull you down into the dark." She reached toward the counter where a folded piece of notebook paper sat beside a ceramic mug, coffee growing cold inside. Her letter. The one that contained the goodbye she could not say out loud. Then she did something that made Giovanni's knees buckle for the first time in 15 years. She walked to the industrial trash bin beside the counter, the one his chef used for vegetable scraps and yesterday's bread, and pulled open the lid. From inside, she extracted a half sandwich wrapped in napkins. It was from the restaurant where she worked night shifts. The crust was hard. The lettuce had begun to brown at the edges. She looked at it for only a second before sliding it into her jacket pocket with the practiced ease of someone who had done this 100 times before. 1,000 times. She was going to take that garbage sandwich out into the rain and feed it to Emma for breakfast. Giovanni Castelliano, the man who controlled 17 restaurant chains, who owned half of Boston's waterfront, who had built an empire on calculated coldness and the kind of power that made grown men weep, could not move. Could not speak. Could not breathe. His right hand hung at his side. His left hand clenched into a fist so tight his fingernails drew blood from his palms. In 15 years, Bruno and Theo had never seen him like this. His two most trusted lieutenants stood in the shadows of the hallway outside the kitchen, watching their boss watch a woman pack her life into trash. Neither man dared to move. "Emma," Mia said softly, reaching for the child's hand. "We're going now. It's time." Emma looked up at her with eyes too old for her 5 years. She had seen things no child should see. Her small fingers gripped Mia's hand with the desperation of someone who had learned that people leave. "Will you come back?" Emma asked. Mia could not answer. Her throat was too tight. Instead, she squeezed the small hand and moved toward the kitchen door. Giovanni stepped sideways, blocking her path. Not with aggression. Not with the menace that had made men beg for mercy. He simply stood there, his body filling the space between her and escape, his soaked white shirt clinging to his chest, his dark eyes burning. "The bill," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. $35,000. Mia's visible eye filled with tears. "I'll pay it back. I don't know how, but I will." I'll take a third job. When was the surgery? 2 weeks ago. Emma's appendix ruptured. She was in pain for 3 days before I could get her to the hospital. By then. Mia's voice shattered. By then it was infected. She almost didn't make it. Giovanni said nothing. He looked at Emma. Her small face was swollen from crying, her lips pale. A child who had survived infection and surgical intervention and the aftermath of trauma, all while living in a world of instability and fear. The bruises on your throat, he said quietly. Who put them there? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Thunder rolled across the sky outside. The lightning came a moment later, turning the entire kitchen bright as day. In that flash of white, Mia looked like a ghost. A ghost of a woman. Almost transparent. Almost already gone. Douglas Hale, she whispered. The manager at Cordelia Blackwood's restaurant. He's been stealing my tips for 6 months. When I told him I was going to report him, he cornered me in the walk-in freezer. He said if I told anyone, he'd make sure I never worked in Boston again. He said he knew people. He said Cordelia would back him up because they owned the kitchen together. Giovanni's jaw tightened. A muscle flexed beneath his skin like a knife trying to cut through stone. How much did he steal? $2,400. That's what I've calculated. $2,400 that was supposed to go to Emma's medical care. $2,400. The amount that meant the difference between keeping a child and losing her. The amount that determined whether a woman disappeared into homelessness or survived 1 more month. There's also the hospital bill, Mia continued, her words rushing out now like water breaking through a dam. I have 14 days to pay 5,000 of it or they'll send it to collections. 14 days, Giovanni. I work 60 hours a week and I make nothing because Douglas steals from me and the other restaurant jobs pay the same and I'm already working so hard I can barely remember my own name. She stopped. Her breathing came shallow and fast. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't let you fix this for me. You're dangerous. These people you work with, they're dangerous. The moment you help me, the moment Emma is connected to you, she becomes a target. She's already lost her family once. I won't put her in danger again. I won't. She reached for the door handle. Giovanni did not move. Did not block her path. Did not stop her. But he did speak, and his words fell into the kitchen like stones into still water. Like the beginning of something that could not be stopped. The people who did this to you, who stole from you, who put their hands on your throat, who took your survival from you, believed you were nobody. A woman so insignificant that it did not matter if they destroyed her. That belief needs to be corrected. Mia froze. Her hand on the door handle. I am nobody, she said. That's the truth. I'm just a night shift waitress with 2 jobs and a child who isn't even mine. Emma is yours, Giovanni said quietly. You are her mother. The woman who pulled her from the street. The woman who would pack garbage into a bag to keep her alive. That makes her yours in every way that matters. Outside, the storm intensified. Wind howled through the city like a wounded animal. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed its way through the rain. What neither of them knew, Giovanni continued, speaking now with the certainty of a man who had decided something fundamental, was that Cordelia Blackwood and Douglas Hale were partners in stealing from every employee in that kitchen. But they were partners in something worse than theft. He turned to Bruno, who had stepped from the shadows into the kitchen's light. Tell her what we found, Giovanni said. Bruno's face was granite. His voice was like gravel being crushed under wheels. The missing children from the shelter where you work. We traced them. Douglas Hale and Cordelia Blackwood have been trafficking them for 3 years. At least 14 children. Maybe more. Mia's knees buckled. Emma was supposed to have been 15. The child's crescent moon birthmark suddenly made perfect sense. Giovanni had not been searching for his daughter because his brother stole her. He had been searching for her because Douglas Hale and Cordelia Blackwood had stolen her, and she had ended up at the shelter where Mia worked, and Mia had found her in the trash behind the restaurant, eating garbage to survive. Mia had saved her. A scarred woman with nothing had saved the missing daughter of the most powerful man in Boston. "We are not done," Giovanni said, and his voice was like a hammer striking the earth. "Nothing that happens next happens to you. You do not carry this weight. You do not carry any of it. You will stay here. Emma will stay here. And tomorrow morning, when the sun rises over this city, the people who hurt you will discover that mercy is not part of my vocabulary." The thunder outside seemed to answer him. The storm raged. And Mia Sinclair, for the first time in longer than she could remember, stopped running. But what she did not know, what no one knew in that moment, was that dawn would bring federal agents to Cordelia Blackwood's doorstep, that surveillance footage would expose 14 years of trafficking, that Douglas Hale would spend his last moments on Earth face-to-face with the consequences of his choices. She did not know that her letter, the goodbye she had written, would never be read. She did not know that her life, the one she thought was ending in that rainy kitchen, was actually just beginning. Like and subscribe to see what happens when vengeance meets mercy, and a ghost of a woman discovers she was never invisible at all. We will see you in the next segment. The clock on the wall of Cordelia Blackwood's 5-star hotel restaurant read 10:41 p.m. The dining room, with its crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths, had emptied 30 minutes earlier. The last couple had left behind a $180 tip on a $400 bottle of wine, and that money was no longer theirs. Mia Sinclair wiped down the mahogany bar, her movements practiced and hollow, like a machine running on fumes. 32 years old but looking closer to 42. Her dark hair, once thick, hung in a thin braid down her back. Her eyes, once bright, the shelter director had told her, were now the color of exhausted sky. Her hands moved across the polished wood, fingers leaving trails on surfaces that cost more than her monthly rent. Douglas Hale stood behind the bar, his thick fingers working the register with the casual efficiency of a man who had stolen from this register 327 times. He was 6'2", built like a concrete block, with a neck that disappeared straight down into his shoulders without any visible angle. His shirt, open at the collar, revealed a cross on a gold chain. A man who prayed on Sundays and pocketed waitress tips on every other day of the week. "Slow night," he said. His voice did not ask for agreement. It stated facts, and facts obeyed him. Mia said nothing. She had learned that silence was safer than words. Douglas's hand closed around the tip jar. 320s were visible through the glass. He slid them out with the deliberate slowness of someone who enjoyed the act of taking. He folded them into his pocket without looking at her. "You see anything, you don't remember it," he said. Not a threat. A reminder. His hands, the ones that prayed with a cross, were the hands of a man who had learned violence long before his voice learned cruelty. The knuckles bore small scars. The kind you get from closed-fist contact with things that break. Mia's shoulders drew inward. Protective, automatic. She had learned this language years ago. The language spoken by men for whom consent was a concept that applied to other people. "Yes," she whispered. "I saw nothing." Douglas smiled. It was not a kind expression. It was the smile of a wolf deciding whether to eat now or eat later. He turned back to the register, and Mia returned to wiping tables that did not need wiping, her breathing shallow, her mind already calculating. 2 children at home. Marcus, 9 years old, asleep on a mattress on the floor of a bedroom the size of a closet. Lily, 6 years old, tangled beside him under a blanket so thin you could see the light of the moon through it. Neither of them knew that their mother had walked 40 minutes to work tonight because the bus fare, which usually cost her $5 round trip, was $5 she did not have. She had walked because every penny, every single penny, needed to reach a number that felt impossible. She reached into her pocket. Her hand closed around a crumpled stack of bills. 110. 3 ones. For singles. $34. This was all that remained between her and Friday's paycheck, and Friday was 4 days away. 4 days meant rent was due. It meant milk for Lily's cereal. It meant the electric bill that arrived with the color red stamped across its face. The restaurant's kitchen door swung open. The smell of seared duck and truffle oil drifted out, rich and complex, the kind of smell that belonged to people with choices. The head chef, a man named Laurent who had never spoken directly to Mia, passed through without acknowledging her. His shoes alone probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. The clatter of expensive china followed him, the sound of a world that valued some people and not others. Mia finished her closing duties at 11:14 p.m. She clocked out without speaking to anyone. The night was already warm, the air pressing down like a hand on her chest. Thunder rumbled somewhere far away. The storm was coming, though she did not know it yet. It was already forming, miles out over the Atlantic, gathering power, preparing to tear through this city like judgment. She walked home because she had to. The streets of downtown Boston were empty at this hour except for the occasional black sedan or the distant wail of a siren. 42 minutes of walking. She counted the blocks the way she counted everything now, in increments of survival. Block 4. Block 8. Block 12. Each one bringing her closer to the apartment and the children and the hospital bill. 1 in the morning, and the homeless shelter where she worked 3 nights a week smelled like industrial cleaner and something else underneath it. Something that no amount of bleach could remove. The smell of people with nowhere else to go. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a sickly white that made the rows of cots look like a hospital ward for people who had already given up. The night supervisor, Patricia, sat at the desk with a clipboard. She was 54, had been doing this work for 16 years, and had learned not to care too much because caring too much meant crying too often. "We had a walk-in about 6 hours ago," Patricia said. "Alone. Nobody's claimed her. No paperwork, no guardians, nothing. She speaks some English, but not much. And there's something you should see." She gestured to a small cot in the corner. On it, under a thin blanket, was a child. Maybe 5 years old. Possibly 4. It was hard to tell because malnutrition makes age uncertain. Her skin was pale. Her hair was dark, matted in places, like it had not been properly washed in weeks. She was asleep, but even in sleep, her body was tense. Her hands were curled into fists. Patricia walked Mia over and gently lifted the child's left wrist. The birthmark was unmistakable. Crescent moon-shaped. The kind of birthmark that a mother would memorize. The kind that a father would search for across a lifetime. "Her name is Emma," Patricia said. That's all she would tell us. She said it in Italian first. "Emma." Then in English. "Emma." And then she stopped talking. She hasn't spoken since we gave her dinner. Mia stared at the birthmark. She stared at the child's face. She thought of the intake process, the bureaucratic machinery that was already grinding into motion. Foster care, probably. A group home eventually. Years of moving between strangers. Years of hands that did not belong to her. Years of wondering if anyone was searching. "She's someone's daughter," Mia said. The words came out quiet, like a prayer. "Yes," Patricia said. "Someone's looking for her, I'm sure. But it takes time. Days, sometimes weeks. The paperwork has to." Mia was already unbuckling the child's shoes. Small shoes. Held together with nothing but faith and the mercy of material that refused to fully disintegrate. "What are you doing?" Patricia asked. "Taking her home," Mia said. "Just for tonight. Until the system catches up. She shouldn't wake up alone in a place like this." Patricia considered this. She had worked here long enough to know the rules. She had also worked here long enough to know that rules and mercy rarely occupied the same room. "Bring her back by morning," Patricia said. "Before shift change." The child, Emma, did not wake during the walk. Mia carried her for most of the way, her arms aching, her legs burning, the weight both heavier and lighter than it should have been. At 3 in the morning, the streets of Boston belonged to only a few people. Night shift workers. Insomniacs. People running from something or toward something, and nobody was stopping them either way. The apartment was dark when Mia arrived. 2 mattresses on the floor of the bedroom, side by side like raft together in an ocean. Marcus slept on one, curled against the wall, his small body rigid with the tension that children carry when they know at some level that the world is not safe. Lily slept on the other, one arm thrown over her face, her breathing soft and regular, still innocent enough to sleep without knowing she was in danger. Mia laid Emma down between them. The child's eyes fluttered but did not open. She found the blanket, the thin one with the hole near the bottom where the seam had given way, and pulled it up to Emma's chin. The 3 children lay like that in the darkness, tangled together, their bodies creating warmth that the apartment's broken radiator could not provide. Mia went to the kitchen. The linoleum floor was peeling in the corner. The sink dripped with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. She sat at the table and pulled the envelope from her purse. The hospital bill. Red letters stamped across the front in urgent capital letters, final notice. The amount was $35,000. $35,000. The shelter had paid for Emma's emergency appendix surgery 3 days ago when she arrived with fever and crying so intense that she could not stand. A child in crisis. A surgery that saved her life. A bill that would destroy everyone else's. Mia had 14 days to pay it. 14 days. She opened her calculator on her phone, the one she kept charged by stealing electricity from the apartment's shared outlet in the hallway. She did the math she had done 100 times before. Paycheck Friday, $347 after taxes. Next Friday, $347. But rent was due on the 1st. Electricity, $84. Water, $32. Food for 3 children, $120 minimum. Bus fare, $15. The ratios had never worked. They had never come close to working. She was always behind by weeks, always making choices about which bill could wait another month, which creditor could be ignored without immediate consequence. $35,000. She had $34. The summer heat pressed against the windows. The apartment had no air conditioning. The broken fan in the corner just moved hot air from one place to another. She could hear Marcus breathing in the other room. She could hear Lily making small sounds in her sleep. She could hear the city around her, distant traffic, the occasional siren, the rumble of thunder that seemed to be getting closer. Outside, the storm gathered itself. The wind was beginning to shift. The pressure in the air was changing. The night was preparing to break open, to pour rain down onto Boston's streets like judgment finally made manifest. But inside the apartment, in the kitchen with the peeling linoleum and the dripping sink, a woman sat in the darkness and did the math one more time. 14 days. $35,000. $34. She folded the bill and placed it on the table. She laid her head down beside it and did not sleep. The rain hammered against the mansion's windows like 1,000 tiny fists demanding entry. Inside the marble foyer, Mia sat on a bench that probably cost more than her entire apartment, her wet clothes dripping onto floors that Italian craftsmen had laid by hand. Every breath sent sharp pain through her ribs. Every swallow felt like glass moving down her throat. Giovanni Castelliano knelt before her, his expensive suit soaked from carrying Emma through the storm. His dark eyes, storm gray, intense, burning with something between rage and gratitude, searched her face with the focus of a man who had just discovered the most precious thing in the world. His men had never seen him like this. In 15 years of service, Bruno and Theo had watched their boss command armies of soldiers, negotiate with crime families, make decisions that cost lives. They had never watched him kneel. "Who did this to you?" His voice was deep, solid like an oath. Not a question anymore. a demand wrapped in something that almost sounded like care. Mia looked away. It does not matter. I should go. I just wanted to make sure she got home safe. The words came out fractured, each one a separate effort. You saved my daughter's life. Giovanni's hands trembled as he reached for the hospital bill she had dropped. The paper was already dissolving into wet pulp. He read the numbers anyway. $35,000. 2 weeks. His jaw tightened like he was clenching something dangerous between his teeth. Who are you? Nobody. The word escaped like a confession. I work at a shelter. And at Cordelia Blackwood's restaurant. I found Emma 3 days ago. She needed surgery. The shelter paid, but now they want. She stopped. Glanced at the little girl clinging to her father's leg like he might vanish if she let go. She is safe now. That is all that matters. Giovanni stood slowly. He extended his hand. When Mia hesitated, he did not insist. Instead, he simply stood there, palm open, waiting. Outside, thunder cracked across the Boston sky like the earth was breaking in half. You spent money you did not have on a stranger's child. You brought her to me in a thunderstorm when you can barely stand. Why? His voice carried no anger, only profound confusion. Why would you help me? I am nothing to you. Mia met his eyes with her one good eye. The other had swollen shut, dark purple spreading across her cheekbone in a bruise shaped exactly like a man's knuckles. She is a little girl who was scared and alone. That is all I needed to know. Bruno appeared in the doorway, his massive frame filling the space. Boss, we need names. We need to know who. Later. Giovanni did not look away from Mia. Get Dr. Reeves. Now. 30 minutes later, the mansion's medical room glowed white under fluorescent lights. Dr. Reeves, a man in his 60s with the calm of someone who had treated gunshot wounds and never asked questions, examined Mia's ribs with gentle hands. Giovanni stood against the wall, his arms crossed, watching. His white shirt hung open, still soaked. His dark hair dripped. He looked like a man carved from stone and rage. Orbital bone fracture, Dr. Reeves said quietly. Severe contusions to the throat. 3 cracked ribs. Lacerations consistent with rings on the attacker's hand. This was sustained within the last 2 hours. Giovanni's knuckles went white where they gripped his crossed arms. How long? I am sorry. The doctor looked up. How long has this been happening to her? Mia, sitting on the exam table in a borrowed shirt that hung loose on her thin frame, said nothing. The silence answered for her. At 1 in the morning, they sat in the kitchen. The marble island stretched between them like a negotiating table. Giovanni had prepared tea himself, dismissing the household staff with a single gesture. Mia held the cup without drinking. Her throat hurt too much. She was trying to disappear into herself, to become invisible the way she had learned to do years ago when invisibility meant safety. Tell me about your children, Giovanni said. Mia's head snapped up. Her eye, the one that was not swollen, widened with suspicion. How did you? Marker stains on your fingers. The kind that only come from homework. Your phone has buzzed 6 times with text signed Marcus and Lily. You keep checking it. He leaned back in his chair, waiting. Tell me. The words came out like water through a broken dam. Marcus was 9. Lily was 6. Their father had left 3 years ago and never sent money or apologies. She worked at the shelter 3 nights a week for $12 an hour. She worked at Cordelia Blackwood's restaurant 6 nights a week for $9 an hour, plus tips that Douglas Hale stole when he thought no one was watching. She had $47 on Tuesday morning. She spent it on shoes for Marcus because his old ones had holes and school started Monday. She had $34 left. The hospital bill was $35,000. They wanted payment in 2 weeks. Tell me the exact breakdown, Giovanni said. His voice was steady, but something flickered behind his eyes. Something dangerous. Rent is $850 on the first. Electricity is $84. Water is $32. Food, the minimum, is $120. Bus fare is $15. I have not been sick in 2 years because I cannot afford to be sick and I cannot afford medication and I cannot afford. She stopped. Looked down at her hands. I cannot afford my children. The words hung in the air like smoke. Giovanni stood and walked around the island. He took her hand. Bruno and Theo, watching from the doorway, actually gasped. Their boss did not touch people. Their boss gave orders from a distance. Their boss moved through the world leaving destruction in his wake, not holding the hands of thin women in borrowed shirts. You will never worry about money again, he said quietly. I will pay the hospital bill. I will pay for everything. Your children's school, their clothes, their food. Everything. Mia pulled her hand back. I do not want your money. People like you do not help people like me without expecting something in return. That is not how the world works. No. Giovanni returned to his seat. It is not. But I am not most people, and what you did deserves more than I can give. So I am giving you this anyway. Accept it. She did not accept it. But she also did not leave. 3 hours later, Giovanni sat behind his desk in the office that overlooked Boston's North End. Maps covered the walls, territories, properties, the invisible borders of his empire. Bruno and Theo stood before him, their expressions grave. Cordelia Blackwood, Bruno began. 55 years old. Owns 4 restaurants. Net worth approximately $8 million. She runs in the same circles as the mayor, 3 judges, half the city council. On paper, untouchable. Douglas Hale, Theo continued. 48 years old. Former enforcer for the Irish mob. Did 5 years in Cedar Junction for assault. He has been working for Blackwood for 3 years as a general manager. Giovanni's jaw clenched. And the connection between them. Bruno exchanged a look with Theo. The kind of look that came before very bad news. We found something, boss. Surveillance footage from 3 years ago. A woman matching Blackwood's description was seen at a warehouse in Southie. The same warehouse where we tracked Emma's trail before it went cold. The office went silent. Only the sound of rain continued, the endless percussion of the storm that refused to break. Are you telling me, Giovanni said slowly, that the woman who hurt Mia, who stole my daughter from me, is operating a restaurant in my city, using my staff to do her dirty work? We cannot prove it yet, Theo said carefully. But the timing matches. Boss, there is something else. We have been tracking Emma's movement since she disappeared. Trying to figure out who took her after your brother. I know what my brother did. The words cut like razor wire. Go on. If Blackwood was involved in the kidnapping, and Hale works for her, then they both knew exactly who Emma was. And if Mia found her, if Mia brought her to you. Bruno trailed off. The implication landed like a punch. Then they used Mia as bait. Giovanni stood. His voice was ice and fire mixed together. They put those bruises on her throat to keep her quiet. They put that hospital bill in her hands. They knew she would go to the shelter. They knew the shelter would call us eventually. Boss, Theo said quietly, we do not think Mia knows any of this. Everything about her checks out. She is exactly who she says, a single mother barely surviving who found a lost child and tried to save her. Then they used her without her knowledge. Which means they made her a target. Giovanni moved to the window. Outside, the rain continued its assault on the city. Which means they are still a threat. What do you want us to do? Bruno asked. Giovanni did not answer immediately. He watched the storm. He thought about a woman holding $34 in her pocket like it was enough to save the world. He thought about the way Mia had flinched when he touched her hand, as if she was not used to gentleness. He thought about his daughter sleeping upstairs in a room that had been waiting 5 years for her return. Find out everything, he finally said. Where they are. Who they work with. How deep this goes. And Bruno, he turned from the window. Find out why they thought they could hurt someone under my protection and survive the consequences. 2 floors above, in a guest room with soft sheets and warm blankets, Mia lay awake in darkness. She had texted Marcus at 2 in the morning, told him she was working an extra shift, that she would see him after school, that he needed to watch Lily and that she loved him both so much her heart hurt. He had texted back, "Okay mommy, love you." The words were misspelled, typed with the 2-fingered hunting method of a 9-year-old, and they broke her heart because he trusted her and she was running out of ways to keep that trust from shattering. She did not know that downstairs, Giovanni Castelliano was making decisions that would reshape the entire city. She did not know that Cordelia Blackwood was, at that very moment, receiving a call from Douglas Hale saying that something had gone wrong, that the shelter woman had been seen at the mansion, that Giovanni Castelliano had the child, and what did she want to do now? She did not know that a storm was gathering above Boston that made the rain outside look gentle by comparison. All she knew was that for the first time in 3 years, she was warm. And safe. And someone was paying attention to the fact that she was drowning. Tomorrow would change everything. But tonight, in the darkness, she allowed herself to believe that the worst was over. She was wrong. The marble foyer was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning, steady and indifferent, the sound of a world that had no idea Mia Sinclair was standing in it with her entire life collapsing like a building made of paper. 7:15 in the morning. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows in golden columns, turning dust motes into tiny stars, and the beauty of it made her want to scream. She held the letter in both hands, the one she had written the night before in the guest room at 2 in the morning, when the world was still dark and impossible and she had believed that disappearing was the only option left. The letter that said, "I would rather disappear than drag you down into my world." Her palms were sweating. She could feel her heart beating in her throat like something trying to escape. In her mind, Marcus was at home waiting for her. Her beautiful 9-year-old boy with his 2-fingered typing and his trust that his mother would come back because his mother always came back, even when she was working double shifts and barely sleeping and so exhausted she forgot to eat. The landlord had come by yesterday. Marcus had texted her at noon, "Mommy, the man came back." He said something about next month's rent. What's rent? She had $34 in her wallet. $34. That was not rent money. That was not anything money. That was the distance between having a home and not having one, compressed into bills she kept separate from her change so she would not spend them on food for herself. She could survive anything. She had survived her husband leaving when Marcus was 2 months old. She had survived Hale's fists. She had survived eviction notices that came in envelopes with red lettering and final notices stamped in ink that looked like blood. She had survived one terrible winter when the heat went out and she slept with both children curled against her body like she was a furnace that could keep them warm through the cold. But she could not survive this. She could not survive staying in this marble mansion and dragging Giovanni Castelliano into the wreckage of her life, because men like him, powerful men, dangerous men, men who had built empires on calculated ruthlessness, they did not save women like her. They used them. They took what they needed and discarded them when they were broken. She had been discarded enough for one lifetime. Emma appeared at the top of the staircase, still in pajamas, holding a stuffed white rabbit that Giovanni had given her. The rabbit cost more than Mia's rent. She knew this without being told, the way she knew the price of every object in this house just by the weight of it in the air. "Mia, are you leaving?" Emma's voice was small. Confused. A child who had already lost too much and was terrified of losing more. Mia's hand stopped shaking. Because she remembered something her own mother had told her once, 23 years ago, before her mother died and left Mia alone at 14 to figure out how to survive. You do not run when a child needs you. You become stronger. You dig deeper. You find places inside yourself you never knew existed. She had run from her husband. She had run from every job that treated her like garbage. But she did not run from children. That was not what she was. For strides. That was how long it took Giovanni Castellano to cross the foyer when he appeared at the top of the stairs beside Emma. He saw the letter in Mia's hands. He saw her face. And he descended without speaking, each step deliberate, controlled, a man who had learned to move through the world like a blade moving through silk. He took the letter from her hands. He read it. His jaw tightened. The scar that ran from his left temple to his cheekbone deepened as the muscles in his face contracted, as rage and something else, something that looked like pain, flickered across his features. You think I would let you disappear? His voice was very quiet. Quiet in the way that made the air itself feel dangerous. You do not understand. Cordelia will destroy me. She has money and lawyers and connections, Anne. And I have something better. He pulled out his phone. One number. One call. 7 words, it is time. The silence that followed stretched across the foyer like a held breath. At 7:43 in the morning, 12 federal agents in tactical gear, body armor dark as midnight, exploded through the front doors of Cordelia Blackwood's 5-star restaurant like a storm made flesh. The restaurant was already full, the breakfast crowd of lawyers and business people and people who had money enough to not worry about hospital bills or rent or where their children would sleep. They had no warning. No indication that the beautiful woman in the Chanel suit and the diamond earrings was anything other than what she appeared to be, a pillar of the community, a philanthropist, a woman who donated to charity. The agents did not care about appearances. They had warrants signed by a federal judge, executed at dawn, sealed documents that had been building for months, months that Giovanni Castellano had spent quietly feeding information to the right authorities, cultivating relationships with federal prosecutors, providing evidence that was too carefully documented to ignore. In the office on the second floor, Douglas Hale was counting cash, stolen tips from servers like Mia, money he had pocketed while she had stood on her feet for 12 hours and come home with empty pockets and empty hands. The door exploded inward. He was on the ground before he could reach the window, before he could run, before he could do anything but lie there gasping, his voice going high and thin and desperate like a cornered animal. I am just the manager. I did not know. Cordelia made me do it. Cordelia made me do everything. An agent read him his rights while another pulled open the desk drawer. $47,000. Neatly stacked. Organized. The careful record-keeping of a man who had been stealing from poor women long enough to make it a business operation. They found his phone next. Text messages on the screen, Cordelia's name appearing again and again. The Sinclair woman is getting suspicious. Want me to handle it permanently? Another message, how much longer do we need her? She knows too much. Hale collapsed, weeping, his body folding in on itself. Please, I will tell you everything. I will testify. Just please do not send me back to prison. The agent's eyes did not change. Prisons, apparently, were a place Hale already knew. In the dining room, Cordelia Blackwood maintained her composure for exactly 10 seconds. 10 seconds of a woman believing that wealth and connections and the right phone numbers could protect her from consequences. Then an agent showed her the warrant. Her face drained of color like water being poured out of a vessel. The document in his hands listed 67 counts. Human trafficking. Kidnapping. Racketeering. Money laundering. Conspiracy. The charges against her looked like the inventory of her crimes, each one written out in legal language that transformed her life into a federal prosecution. I demand my lawyer, she said, but her voice no longer carried the ringing authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. It sounded like a child trying to command the ocean to stop. They led her out in handcuffs, her diamond earrings catching the morning light in fractured reflections. News cameras had gathered outside. Former employees watched from across the street, a server who had worked double shifts and never been paid fairly, a line cook who had been verbally abused daily, a hostess who had been touched inappropriately and told to smile about it. They watched Cordelia Blackwood's downfall like people watching the sun rise after a long darkness. By 9 o'clock in the morning, every news channel in Boston was running the story. The broadcast cut between the restaurant exterior, cordoned off with yellow tape, federal agents moving in and out with evidence boxes, and the courthouse steps where a federal prosecutor named Rebecca Torres stood at a podium with microphones in front of her face like a forest of silver. Cordelia Blackwood and Douglas Hale face a combined 87 counts, Rebecca Torres said, and her voice was steady, measured, the voice of someone who had been waiting a long time to say these words. If convicted on all charges, they are looking at a minimum of 40 years in federal prison. No parole. This operation was sophisticated, well-funded, and it exploited vulnerable women and children for profit. Justice will be served. 40 years. The words hung in the air like smoke. Giovanni watched the press conference from his office on the 3rd floor of his mansion, sitting at a desk made of dark wood that had been polished by the hands of servants for 100 years. Mia stood beside him, her hand trembling against his shoulder. She was crying. Not the desperate, terrified crying of the night before, but something different, something that looked like a pressure valve releasing, like a dam finally breaking after holding back an ocean for too long. "They cannot hurt me anymore," she said. It was not a question. "They can never hurt you again," Giovanni confirmed. His hand covered hers. Federal prison. 40 years. They will die in cells that are too small for the things they have done. Too quick and too easy and too merciful, but it is what the law allows. He turned to face her fully, his grey eyes holding the weight of morning light. "You saved my daughter, Mia. You carried her when she could not walk. You loved her when she was terrified. Let me save you now. Let me show you that the world has more in it than suffering." But what neither of them knew, what no one in that mansion could possibly have known, was that the real transformation was not going to be found in the downfall of her enemies. It would be found in something quieter, something deeper, something that would require both of them to believe in the possibility of being healed. Outside, the Boston sky was beginning to clear. The storm had passed. The sun was climbing higher with each minute, burning away the grey clouds that had hung over the city like a curse. And on the 3rd floor, in the moment after Giovanni spoke those words, Emma appeared in the doorway holding both of their hands, understanding without being told that something fundamental had shifted. Something that meant her family, this strange, broken, beautiful family that had found each other through catastrophe, would never be torn apart again. The rain had stopped. But the real healing was only just beginning. 6 months later, the kitchen of Giovanni's mansion fills with the sound of children arguing over breakfast. Marcus, 9 years old and still suspicious of joy, reaches for the last piece of bacon before Lily's small hand can grab it. She squeals. Emma, sitting at the marble island with her homework spread before her, does not look up but her mouth twitches in a smile. The crescent moon birthmark on her left wrist catches the morning light as her pencil moves across the page. Giovanni appears in the doorway. His dress shirt remains unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to the elbow, his dark hair still wet from the shower. He does not announce himself. He simply stands there, watching them, the woman who walked through a thunderstorm with his stolen daughter, the 2 children she protected with a body that was breaking, the girl he thought he would never see again. His grey eyes, eyes that have calculated empire and ordered consequences for 15 years, hold something that his men have never witnessed before. Something that looks like peace. Mia catches his gaze across the kitchen. She is flipping eggs at the stove, her movement steady now, no longer the frantic efficiency of someone racing against hunger. She smiles. Not the careful, guarded smile she wore 6 months ago. This smile is real. It reaches her eyes. "The eggs are almost ready," she says. "Marcus, move over. Emma needs room to eat." "But Mom," Marcus starts, then stops. The word is still new on his tongue. "Mom. Not Mia. Not that woman. Mom." No bacon negotiations at breakfast, Mia continues. This is a household rule. Write it down if you need to remember. Giovanni moves into the kitchen. He kisses the top of Mia's head, a gesture so casual, so ordinary, that it contains an entire universe of transformation. 3 weeks ago, she told him she still flinches when people move too quickly. Now she leans into his touch. He sits at the table beside Emma. Good morning, Bella. How is the mathematics? Confusing, Emma says. But not impossible. That is the only kind of mathematics worth doing, he tells her. He reaches across and points to an equation on her paper. See this? It is like running an empire. You calculate the cost of every decision. You look at the numbers. Then you decide if the outcome is worth the investment. In this case, is 42 cents worth solving for X? Emma considers this with absolute seriousness. Probably not. I will just skip this one. Do not skip it. Work it out. But understand why you are working it out first. Bruno enters the kitchen without knocking. He is Giovanni's right hand, a man built like a fortress with grey threading through his dark beard. He stops in the doorway. He always stops in the doorway now. This is a threshold he has learned to respect. Behind him, Theo waits in the hallway. They both wear the same expression, something between a smile and disbelief, that they have worn since the day Mia moved into the East Wing with Marcus and Lily. The Boston papers came this morning, Bruno says. The Federal Post is running another piece on the Cordelia Blackwood appeal. It was denied. 40 years stands. She will die in prison. Giovanni nods. He does not look away from Emma's homework. The villa outside the tall kitchen windows glows with late summer light. Somewhere in the garden, the oak tree stands strong, its branches spread like welcoming arms. Good, he says simply. Also, the Children's Protection Foundation received the anonymous donation, Bruno continues. $5 million. They are naming a wing after an unknown benefactor. They are calling it the Hope Initiative. That was not me, Giovanni says. But his eyes move to Mia for just a moment. She is setting plates on the table. She does not turn around. But her shoulders straighten. After Bruno and Theo leave, the 5 of them eat breakfast together. Marcus tells a story about school, something about soccer, about being chosen first for a team. Lily hums while she eats. Emma explains the mathematics to Giovanni, and he asks questions like she is advising him on matters of state. Mia watches them. She watches her children learning how to be safe. She watches Emma, who still sometimes wakes screaming from nightmares, now comfortable enough to hum while she eats. Later, in the afternoon, Giovanni finds her in the garden. She sits on the same bench where Emma used to play before she was taken, before the world became a place of terrors and thorns. The bench is no longer surrounded by dying flowers and cracked stone. Giovanni had it rebuilt. Everything broken was rebuilt. The grass is new. The roses are blooming. There is a small fountain now, its water catching the light like diamonds. Mia does not look up as Giovanni sits beside her. They have learned to sit in silence without it meaning anything except that they are choosing to be near each other. I keep thinking about that night in the rain, Mia says finally. When I almost disappeared. When I wrote you that letter saying I would rather disappear than drag you into my world. I would have found you, Giovanni says. Not as a question. As a fact. I know. She leans against his shoulder. The gesture is so simple. It took her 6 months to learn that simple gestures of trust were possible. My therapist asked me last week why I think I survived. Not just physically. But why I did not break completely. I told her I did not know. She said trauma does not define us. How we survive it does. Giovanni's hand finds hers. I spent 3 years thinking I was broken, Mia continues. Her voice is steady but her hands are trembling. That the universe was punishing me for something. That I deserve to count pennies and eat from garbage and walk through storms with wet feet and hunger in my belly. But then I found Emma. She stops. The words catch like hooks in her throat. And she led me to you. And now, she gestures at the garden, the mansion, the window where Marcus can be seen doing homework at a real desk with a real lamp. Now I have this. I do not know what I did to deserve it. Giovanni turns to face her. His scar runs from his left eye to his cheekbone, a map of old violence. But his face, in this moment, holds no coldness. You were kind when the world was cruel, he says. You were brave when you had every reason to be afraid. You saved a child you did not know because it was the right thing to do. That is what you did to deserve this. He pauses. The sound of the fountain fills the silence between them, a small and constant music. Cordelia Blackwood and Douglas Hale are in federal prison, he continues. 40 years. No parole. The FBI used their case to dismantle 3 human trafficking rings across Massachusetts and Connecticut. 17 children have been recovered. All because you refused to look away when you found Emma. Mia's eyes fill. I just did what anyone would do. No, Giovanni says. His voice carries the weight of absolute certainty. You did what almost no one would do. You sacrificed everything for a stranger. And it changed the world. He pulls her close. His chest is solid against her cheek, his heartbeat steady and real beneath the fabric of his shirt. The storm will pass, he says, and you are far stronger than you think. I told you that the first night. Do you believe it now? Mia looks toward the garden where Marcus and Lily run with Emma beneath the oak tree. Their laughter is bright and unbroken, the sound of children who no longer carry the weight of fear. She watches them play tag, watches Lily trip and Marcus catch her, watches Emma spin with her arms outstretched like she is reaching for the sky itself. Yes, Mia says. I believe it now. What neither of them knows, what they will discover together, in the slow and tender months to come, is that this moment, this garden, this family that was stitched together from broken pieces, is only the beginning of the story. The real ending is still being written. And it will be written in quiet moments like this one, in the everyday miracles of a child who sleeps without screaming, a mother who no longer counts pennies, a man who learned that strength is not about power but about choosing to be good. The sun moves lower. The shadow of the oak tree stretches across the garden like a prayer. And in the kitchen window, a light turns on, warm and golden, waiting for them to come home. This story teaches us that even in the darkest moments, love finds a way. If you believe that, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and tell us how this story made you feel. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.